Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillah. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. This is my first tutorial, or this is the first video I have in my channel, and I'd like to discuss or come up with a tutorial for Islamicate Digital Humanities using Julia. The reason why I want to teach this is that when I searched YouTube, I did not find like tutorials on this topic. There are, of course, some results on, say, on Islamicate Digital Humanities. It seems like it's a talk or it's a conference, but there's no like step by step as to how you can do this, right? Also, if you search the web, there are very limited resources on this one. So, again, welcome. And so, I guess let me first introduce myself before we dive in as to what this topic is all about. So I'm Al-Ahmadgaid. I have a Master of Science in Statistics and a Master of Arts in Islamic Studies, which I recently got from the same university, which is University of the Philippines. I'm currently working as a manager of a advanced analytics department of a multinational company, but this series of tutorial or this channel has nothing to do with the company I'm working on. And therefore my opinion here is basically just my own, right? So let's then proceed to understanding the title. Islamicate Digital Humanities using Julia. What do we mean by that? Okay, when we say humanities, we are referring to what is this? We are referring to, of course, a field of humanities which deals with arts, literature, history, and so on and so forth, right? So that's something we know already. When we say digital, we are referring to anything that can be accessed via computer, right? Anything that we can interact with via computer, right? So that includes digital text, or that includes images, that includes videos and sounds and audios and so on and so forth, and all of the data that we see in the internet as well, right? These are all digital. And then when we say, so combining the two, digital humanities, this simply means that instead of like working with a like an actual physical text, for example, I have here the translation of the Quran, we are now working with a digital version of these texts, right? Instead of like working with a physical text, we are working with the digital version of it, right? Now, when we say, so that's the digital humanities, right? So combining the two. So what do you mean by Islamicate? Okay, when we say Islamicate, we are actually referring to not only Islamic, say, topics, but anything that was influenced by Islamic civilizations. So it could be like arts, architectures of, say, some buildings, for example, but but not a mosque, for example, but it was influenced by that, by Islamic civilization, simply because they were part of the Islamic empire in history, for example. That can Another thing is, for example, a text, for example. It's not necessarily a Quran or a Hadith, for example, but or any other scholarly works that was done by Islamic scholars, but also those that was not done by Islamic scholars, but was influenced by Islamic civilizations, like, for example, right? So in a way, when we say Islamicate, it's actually broader in scope. So you can think of it like, if this is Islamic field, for example, then we have here Islamicate, which covers Islamic and also other topics that is not inherently Islamic but was influenced by Islamic civilizations, right? So combining digital humanities with Islamicate would simply mean that instead of like studying all of the digital humanities, which covers not only Islamicate texts, but also, say, other English texts, other Filipino texts, for example, we now limit our scope into Islamicate. digital humanities only. So Islamicate, or that would mean like any text that was influenced by Islamic civilizations, right? So that's the piece. That's the Islamicate Digital Humanities. It's a digital humanities field, but focused on Islamicate topics, right? Now, what about Julia? When we say using Julia, so Julia is a tool, right? When we do digital humanities, we have to study digital humanities, or we have to study humanities using computers, right? Because we are now dealing with digital text, right? And so, how can we then, in a way, do this? Well, we have to come up with a tool, or at least we have to use a tool. And it could be a software, for example, or any software, for example. But for this series of tutorial, we are going to use a programming language. It's called Julia. So at this point, maybe it's not clear as to what do we mean by programming language. We're going to discuss this, but in short, programming language, you can think of it like a natural language, for example, Arabic, English, Tagalog, for example. But a programming language is actually a way for us to communicate with a computer. So if a natural language is our way to actually communicate with other individuals, for example, or human beings, right? Programming language, in short, is just a language that we use to communicate with computers so that we can create some instructions for the computers to process the Islamic digital text, for example, that we are going to study. So that's the intention of this one. And so therefore, when we say Islamic Digital Humanities using Julia, we are therefore studying Islamic Digital Humanities using a software or using a programming language called Julia. Okay? And so at a high level, what do we mean by this one, right? So if you're going to look at the high level architecture as to what is this that we are trying to study, right? And why is it like beneficial to really spend our time on this one? Well, you can think of it, or you can look at it from a lens of three high level steps. First, we have a data or our input, and then we have a process, and then we have our output. If you're going to study Islamic texts, right, without using digital humanities, then our input would be a physical text, which is this one. And then after that, our process to studying this is actually done manually. So back then, scholars, I think even up until now, some of these scholars from the field of humanities, they go through the text one by one, study it, and so on and so forth, and try to analyze the text, right? At least that's my limited understanding. So that's their process, and then after that, the output would be some scholarly works or some research on that one, right? That's how they do it manually. But since we are doing digital humanities, then that would mean we are processing this using computers. So that would mean our data input in this case is not a physical text, but a digitized Islamic text, right? So a digitized version of this, for example. And then after that, instead of like processing the text manually by going through the text itself and reading it, right, which would consume so much time, we're going to use a programming language. We're going to communicate with the computer. We're going to create an instructions. We're going to apply some techniques from the field of statistics and machine learning, and try to create these instructions using Julia programming language that we can then run in this computer, so that the computer can then do the necessary instructions that we are going to do to process the digitized Islamic text. And then after that, we're going to have our output. Our output, again, similar to the manual work, for example, which is getting an insights. But the good thing about digitized humanities field is that digital humanities field is that likely we were able to get some new insights, because we can take advantage of the power of computers that we have nowadays, which can process many instructions, or which can do um, what's this several processing, for example. So which is actually very, very efficient compared to a human being, right? So this is how I would describe the benefit of studying this topic. But just to be very specific, right? If we look at it from the lens of like efficiency, effectiveness, experience, and insights, in terms of efficiency, it will be very efficient, right? Simply because when dealing with digital humanities, or when using computers to study digitized uh, texts of, say, the Quran, for example, it will be very efficient because it can do repetitive tasks very, very fast, right? Much faster than doing it or than studying it manually, right? Going through the pages one by one. So that's the efficiency part. In terms of effectiveness, it will increase your productivity and give you new insights. So it's very effective in that sense, right? And in terms of experience, you will also learn the side of science and not just the humanities, right? Because in order for us to study digitized text, we can, of course, use um, techniques from the field of science, especially from the field of statistics and machine learning. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the final product of this would be an insight. So it will likely be a new insight, simply because you are very efficient, or you'll be able to extract, or you will be able to process a lot of data compared to doing it manually. Um, so that's how I see it. So Alhamdulillah, I guess you learned something, and I hope you get motivated uh, to go through the series of tutorials I've been going to have. So Alhamdulillah, see you in my next tutorial. Bye. Assalamu alaikum.